being or trying to be polite. My name is Ignaz Füsken, for those I haven't met yet, and virtually or physically. I happen to actually have the pleasure to be today's host for our first session of the big LPM meetup, which we run as a virtual meetup. We would have liked it to be actually on site, on premise, but that's, due to given circumstances, probably a challenge or a bridge too far. The question many of you may have asked is, why are we doing this? And for those who have actually who have contributed and are still contributing actually to writing a book, the response is much easier than for others. The 27 authors actually came together to draft a new book on LPM, and in particular on those aspects that should help us to move actually from the initial successes we've actually we've experienced to the next stage of legal project management. And based on that community, the idea actually was brought up to sort of accompany the whole initiative with actually a series of meetups, allowing each author to provide a quick sneak preview, a glimpse into what they found as being actually a real differentiator, a new idea, something that's conceptually actually helping us actually to move to the next stage of legal project management. So therefore, this is where the idea of the big LPM idea is coming from. Initially, the big ideas, if you want to Google this, exist a lot on Google. There's big idea for almost anything. So we don't try to reinvent the wheel or actually aim for the stars, but you'll find the topics we are going to cover over the next 7 meetup sessions are actually addressing a variety of very different angles, from HR-related issues, teaming issues, change management issues, legal design issues, technology-driven topics, organizational developments, and so forth. Because LPM is much more than just actually simply running a sequence of tasks. It's about actually a framework and a different way to look actually at the meta management cycle. And the meetup is actually meant to actually help introduce also those who have not been fully exposed to the idea of legal project management, find a first actually avenue into the topic. So therefore, I'm quite glad. You see also the idea is because we believe law actually initially was a very local, a very domestic exercise, but the world today, I mean, not least thanks to COVID-19, is a little village, as a matter of fact. And if I look around today, we get colleagues from Spain, Portugal, South Africa, Sweden, Germany, US, and South Africa. Have I forgotten anybody? I hope not. Czech Republic. Yeah, I should be good on this one. Yes, we do have a cultural bias, each of us, because our legal systems may actually operate at different speeds and according to different frameworks. But as a matter of fact, we always find a common denominator, something we can learn from each other, because, I mean, without actually taking any chances, but the US system is much more mature compared to others, or the Australian legal system. But that may not mean that it will be 100% relevant for, say, European jurisdictions, but there may be something in there as an idea that we can benefit from over here, say, in Europe and elsewhere. So having this sort of global crowd coming together is also one of the driving aspects of today's meetup. In that regard, without actually further ado, I would like to just go through a couple of ground rules. One is, if you like, during the presentations, be muted, but this is nonetheless an interactive session. So in order to sort of organize this a little bit, it would probably be helpful to for the presenters to actually pick up your interest in asking a question or making a comment by simply using the hand signal functionality, which is usually located at the bottom of your screens under reactions. So that may help in that regard, or you simply unmute yourself and then find actually a thinking pause to interject. It would be great actually to have you on screen as long as possible, because it's much easier for those who present actually to see and sort of interact with you directly. And finally, we were going to run the session for 1.5 hours. We fully acknowledge that we all have busy lives these days, and probably also a more complex actually daily routine compared to previous times. So we will stick to that time frame. And yeah, we each the rules for each presenter are very straightforward. It's basically about 15 minutes introduction and sort of actually prompting us with an idea, a concept, what have you, and then we open the floor for questions. Each presenter will also actually refrain from, that was the preceding actually discussion, refrain from actually offloading a slide deck, meaning actually hundreds of PowerPoint slides, but rather actually stick to a few. So for those who have who are actually here for the first time, this is what you usually do with meetups. They leverage actually usually a TED talk style. So it's about actually presenting an idea and not necessarily presenting your capabilities in PowerPoint. And that's what we try to stick to. So I wish us all a very interactive sessions. No limits, no actually restrictions here in terms of asking questions, even though if they may sound more like a beginner's question or a question that may be very obvious. This is about actually interaction. This is about actually us operating as a community and exchanging views. So in that regard, I'd love to actually hand over to Anna. So you have the great pleasure. We all have the great pleasure actually going to listen to your presentation, because you got a very interesting topic that you're going to cover, which is not the usual norm. And I believe that for that you earn even actually bigger credits, because it's really actually a very different angle on a substantive aspect of actually developing LPM skills. Over to you, Anna.
Okay, thank you, Ignaz. I'm very happy to stay here. Thank you very much for inviting me, and to collaborate with your book was really a great chance. And as you said, I'm exploring a phase of legal project management that is not very common, something that can seem a little bit abstract, but maybe is much more concrete and practical than we imagine at the first moment, because it's a reflection about LPM as an environment that rewards multiple intelligences. So how do we act in LPM? What kind of intelligence does LPM attract? And how can we work with different intelligence in legal matters? So I would like to share my presentation. It's very short, as you said. Just let me share the screen and start with some ideas. I think you have it. So first of all, I started with the first idea that I mentioned. Can we use different types of intelligence to manage a legal project? My experience is that I have been teaching during 10 years, more or less, legal project management to lawyers from different countries, from different cultures. I would say from different generations. They all had different ages. Some of them were from legal firms, some other were from legal departments. And what I found in common with all this training was that all the lawyers that I trained were really able to understand and apply legal project management since the very first moment. So it was quite easy to teach them legal project management. It was just to maybe overcome the first resistance that they have, but then they were very quick in learning and applying. Most of them decided to apply it in their organization, and some others decide to start their own LPM consultancies. So I started with one question. It's true that since 2008, we have been working on legal project management, and we have said that legal project management was a better environment than traditional management case. It was a better environment because we were able to cut costs, to reduce costs, and at the same time to increase the quality in the handling of legal matters. We wanted to improve the work environment. We want to generate a more solid, transparent, and trustworthy relationship with the client. And that was the goal. But how was it really possible? I mean, is LPM a really fertile place where to learn, where to work, where to establish new relationship with clients? That was my question. As a project manager, part of my responsibility, I think, is to understand how to create the best environment in which to solve problems and generate opportunities, because this is for me legal project management, an environment to solve problems and generate opportunity for the clients. So I started to connect two different concepts, legal project management and multiple intelligences. Just was this, starting to connect things and to see which were the results of these connections. I would say they are environments in which each individual with their own kind of intelligence can learn and participate to their fullest potential. And I think legal project management is one of these environments. So I started to study Gardner. I mean, I know about our Gardner and his very known publication that was Frame of Minds, the Theory of Multiple Intelligences, but I have never read the book. And so I started to read. And I would like to say that I find the answer to my question, but I just find more and more and more questions when I started to study. So I have much more question than answer. But anyway, I think it was interesting because Gardner, what he did was basically to use the word multiple to highlight the unknown number of human capabilities, and the word intelligence to say that these capacities are just as important as linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences. Why this? Because starting from the intellectual quotients, we have always give much more prominence to linguistic and logical mathematical skills or intelligence or talent, whatever you want to call them. But there are many other intelligence that has the same right, and they are not really explored. So the intellectual quotient was created at the beginning of the 20th century by Alfred Bonnet, with the idea of understand which pupils in Paris, in primary schools, would succeed in their studies and which would fail. And then this IQ was extended as a test in the United States. But there is a limit in the IQ that basically can understand which pupils can succeed or fail in school, but not understand if you are going to succeed or fail in a profession in the future. So which is your future in as legal project manager, for example, or as lawyer? We do not know, because what we take in consideration with the IQ is just linguistic and logical mathematical abilities. But there are much more abilities, and Gardner said that we do not have a unique set of mental abilities, but we have many capacities that we can call intelligences. And just to mention and let you understand what are these intelligences, I can just make it bigger just to give you the chance to read it. We have many. For example, we have the linguistic intelligence, that is the ability to use language skills, as we said, and the logical mathematical, that is the logical, mathematical, and scientific ability. And that's for sure. I mean, that's our skills that everybody of us use and understand. But then we have more. The visual spatial intelligence, that is the ability to form a mental model of a space and to maneuver and operate to use this 3D model. And then we have the kinesthetic intelligence, that is the intelligence that uses the body to solve the problem. How can we use the body to solve a problem? The musical intelligence, that is when some people windows are open through sound, reeds, and tones. Interpersonal intelligence, that is the ability to feel connected to other human beings. And the other one that is similar but different, that is the intrapersonal intelligence, that is the capacity to employ self-reflection in understanding. That's where the first 7 intelligences that were commented in frame of work, in frame of mind. And then we added 2 more, that were the naturalist intelligence, how some people light up when in contact with nature, and the existential intelligence, that is when people are able to find in everything an higher purpose. So we do not have just an intelligence, we usually have a combination of intelligence. For example, if you are a violin player or a piano player, of course, you can have a great musical intelligence, but also you need a kinesthetic one to use the hands to play the instrument. So we need more intelligence than we think, even if we are maybe talented with one or the other more than the rest of them. What is, I think, the core of my investigation? It's about the point of access of every one of us. I mean, in front of every situation, we can learn more easily or less easily, depending on if we can find a point of access that is right for us. So you can approach different things according to your different intelligence. And I think legal project management is like a point of access for everybody of us. I mean, sometimes we are not good in certain issue, but we are very good in others, or we are good in this issue, but entering from a different point of access. Just to make an example, I would say that Stephen Hawking was really bad at school. That was strange. And his grades were among the worst in his class, but he was very curious. And maybe his intelligence was not a linguistic one. Maybe it was a spatial one, spatial from the space, or a kinesthetic one. So it was a genius. It was a genius, but maybe the school was not able to understand his genius. And he needed to find another point of access to reveal his talent. That's another point. How should law school work to educate people according to their own intelligence? I mean, if we follow Gardner in this school that have been able to incorporate his theory into their daily activity, students work on project and present it to their teachers and classmates. And the work is evaluated by examining the final product. So they are used to stay in a project-based environment. And this is the best way to express these different intelligences. So when we are speaking of legal project management, maybe, yes, we are in an environment that rewards multiple intelligences. Just to make some example, just taking into consideration the definition of intelligence, that is the ability, and for those of you who are very near to legal project management or project management, just remember, how do you define a project? Because it's very similar to the way we define intelligence. The intelligence is the ability to solve problems or to create products that are valued within one or more cultural settings. This ability allows us to address a situation in which a goal is being pursued or to plan the necessary path that leads to that goal. So if we think to the definition of project, we have a very similar approach, because project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Basically, through project managers wants to solve a need or exploit an opportunity. So that's very similar. So intelligence and projects are really related between them. And I think that if we examine the 9 areas, we can find many intelligence that are working in each area. For example, I was thinking to explore at first the linguistic intelligence. The linguistic intelligence, because maybe it's the most known. What is the linguistic intelligence? A poet, for example, uses the core operation of language with spatial clarity. People possessing such intelligence show a sensitivity to the meaning of words, to the order among words, to the sounds, rhythm, inflection. I made the example of a poet, but I could make the example of a lawyer, because lawyers too are really are really talented in linguistic intelligence. They need to use the words as key to fulfilling the desired service. I mean, there are some aspects like rhetorical aspects, mnemonic potential, or explanation that are typical in the lawyer profession. But if I think to legal project manager, I would say that they also need the linguistic ability, and they need it, for example, for convincing people, persuading people, directing people, reminding, recording, explaining, and they need the linguistical intelligence to communicate, for example, project aim, or how to achieve some goals, for example. They need linguistic abilities to manage stakeholders, to manage team, to manage client. We are using more and more storytelling as a way to establish connection with people and to tell them about the legal service. So linguistic intelligence is used more and more, as well as maybe logical and mathematical intelligence, because I would say that there are sometimes aversions to mathematics. Lawyers sometimes has this aversion to mathematics and to numbers, but then they use the numbers and in many legal matters, for example, in calculation of damages and product failure investigation, and establishing cause in torts, forensic evidence in criminal cases, and employment discrimination modeling. I mean, Daniel Lina is using quantitative analysis more and more to teach people how to do certain things. And I think it's a revolution inside the legal sector. But the most important of mathematical is not just about number. It's about thinking logically in sequences, for example. So when we are building the word breakdown structure, it's maybe something we need to have. As well, for example, if we are dividing in groups and subgroups of activity, or we are identifying connection on or sequences or activities, like, for example, in the Gantt chart. So word breakdown structure and Gantt chart are tools where the mathematical intelligence can apply, but we can have a mathematical and statistic approach in many issues, not just this one. For example, when we are speaking about artificial intelligence or analysis of data, of machine learning, I mean, we need this kind of logical and mathematical approach. And then there are the others that are less known as intelligence, but I would say that they can apply to, for example, in the spatial intelligence. The spatial intelligence is the intelligence to maneuver and operate a mental model of space. And those with visual spatial intelligence could be compared maybe to excellent search engines or browsers. They can manipulate visual representation of the physical world in their minds, and are often incredibly talented in solving puzzle or mazes, for example. And how do we use this kind of intelligence in project management? I would say that there are some areas that allow us to see the big picture of a project like in 3D, to understand all the perspectives of the project. For example, the area of integration, or the project charters, or the project plans. The same word breakdown structure is a good example of spatial intelligence as an abstract model in which one is reasoning in three-dimensioning using mental imagery and spatial reasoning. So, and the ability also, for example, to anticipate moves and their consequences seem closely tied to strong imagery and abstract intelligence. So there is a space for spatial intelligence talented people to work in project management. I would say that it's easy to find connection with the other intelligence, but sometimes it's not. For example, if I speak about kinesthetic or bodily intelligence, it seems harder to find a connection between legal project management and this kind of intelligence. But for example, we know that legal project manager as lawyer and lawyer too use their body to solve problems or to produce products. More and more there are some techniques like, for example, Kanban or Scrum or many others that allow us to use our body to solve some problems. And if you think, for example, to another techniques that we are using in the legal sector, that it's quite different from the traditional techniques, is the use of Lego. Lego means face-to-face meeting, use of something really material that is connected to our emotional mind. So it's true that this is very revolutionary as a method for the legal sector, but there is a connection between the ends that we use and the emotional areas of our mind, something that is corroborated by a number of studies. So are we using the kinesthetic intelligence in project management? I would say that in some way we are. Are we using the musical intelligence? Well, this is hard to justify, but if we use a metaphor, maybe we can say that the project needs to be heard. Hearing the project means understanding the rhythm of the project, the poses of the project, the tones of the project. And this approach can influence project workflow, for example, or project time management, as well as the relation between the team and the client. As you see in the picture, there is another intelligence that was added out of the first book, that is the Naturalist Intelligence. And that is for people that really connect with nature. It's hard maybe to find a connection here, but it's true that we can reverse the perspective and say that the LPM environment can be really benefited by people who connect with nature, because usually these people have much more developed concentration, memory, and attention. They're spending time outside, and this can be a boost to mental health and mental well-being. So being in nature and being connected to nature means that we are having in our project more, I would say, more centered people with less depression, less negative moods, and that's it's a benefit for the project. As well, it is a benefit to have people with existential intelligence, that is basically to tackle the big question in life. So this can be, for example, philosophical and abstract thinkers that have a genuine curiosity about the meaning of life, or other kind of profile, like including president. I wouldn't speak right now president of countries, because of course what's happening in the United States is calling us the attention. But I would say such kind of people can have this kind of intelligence. And I think that there is space for this intelligence in project management when we are thinking to the purpose of legal project management and the purpose of the project itself. So I think we have space for this. So the other two are very known, because I think that Daniel Goleman transformed them into the emotional intelligence, but Garner defined them as intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligences. Interpersonal intelligence is the ability to understand the others around us, what they are motivated by, how do they work, how to work with them cooperatively, for example. And the intrapersonal is much more about us, about the inward-oriented skill. I mean, it's the ability to form a true model of oneself. So as projects are made by people and for people, I think that both these two intelligence are very, very important in project management. And we can see how can we apply them in very different moments, because every time that we are working with people, directing people, being member of team, leading different teams, negotiating with people, solving conflict resolution, having attention to the customer service, to the customer experience, to how to retain customers. I mean, every time that we are dealing with problem solving and with people, we need such kind of intelligences in legal project management. So the idea finally, and just to have an end, because I do not want to waste time, and I want to leave the floor to the other speakers, is just that we all have different kinds of intelligences, and the legal project management system is, I would say, an environment with different point of access. So even if you have a different intelligence, I mean an intelligence that is not linguistic, neither mathematical, you can have a good experience in legal project management. You can use the other intelligence in legal project management. And you can use them just because I would say this is an ideal environment to use them. I mean, that maybe is the reason why people can learn legal project management so easily and then apply it so easily. So the first conclusion is that I would say that LPM needs to attract as many intelligence as possible to be applied in the different stage of project delivery to improve the process and its results. And the second point is that I would say that we need to improve this environment to make it every time better and better, to let people be able to really reveal all their potential and makes them to work as better as they can, as comfortable as they can, as productive as they can, as creative as they can. So we have a commitment, I think, in terms of project management to keep the 9 intelligence windows open. And I think this is something different. We do not really spend a lot of time on it. Maybe this is a different issues that we do not reflect so much. But I hope this chapter in the new book can be a moment of reflection to understand how we do participate in project management, with what kind of intelligence we do participate in legal project management, and how can we do to improve this environment to let these 9 windows open for everybody. So that's more or less what I wanted to say and to share among this great group of people all connected. So thank you.
Thank you a lot. I mean, this is a very fascinating approach to something rather outside the usual norm when we actually look at meta life cycles and so forth. So a big thank you. And I would like to you may have seen in the chat, Anna, Labo actually asked whether you can confirm that one is actually born with a specific actually set of intelligences, or just one as a nuanced sort of trait, as the second part of the question, whether we can all develop other intelligences later in life.
Yeah.
So what would be your response?
Yeah, that are 2 hot points, and they're very interesting. I would say that at the beginning, Garner was saying that we born with a set of intelligences, but later on, he began to say that we can, of course, work on the other intelligence, and that's the aim of the schools, I would say, to foster the intelligence that we have, and at the same time to work on the other intelligence. But it's true that we have, everybody of us as a kind of point of access to every discipline, to every issue that we used to use more than others. And of course, I think that the second question is more or less the same idea. We can develop other intelligence in our life, it's true. How much are we talented with them? Well, it depends. I mean, there is a difference between the boy that started with 3 years to learn how to play the piano, and with the adult that started with 30 years to play the pianos. So life is different for everybody, but we have the chance to improve our intelligence, of course.
Thank you. Any other comments, remarks, questions? Marian, you're...
Yeah, Thank you very much, Anna, for this thought-inspiring perspective on legal project management. While you were talking, I was thinking, where have I seen these different kinds of intelligences in legal project management? And I actually came up with a couple of practical examples, which I would like to share with you.
Thank you.
One was many years ago, where I was working for a Swedish law firm, and we were working on a big M&A transaction on the seller side, which was quite interesting, because at the beginning we thought we were going to sell a group of about 25 companies, and in the end we sold a group that consisted about 95 companies. So while preparing this sale, we were literally finding new subsidiaries under every stone we turned. And we had one assistant who obviously had great spatial intelligence, because she turned her room into a 3D representation of these huge amount of information that had to be structured. So she had signs everywhere, and she was storing information in certain places. So that was clearly spatial intelligence at work. And I've also found examples of interpersonal and maybe even existential intelligence. For the past 5 years, I've been working with one of the international law firms here in Stockholm. I've been training almost every one of their staff, and luckily we included a couple of assistants in the training mix. And even more luckily, I got not only to train some of the assistants, but also to coach them one-on-one. And it turned out one was a person with great interpersonal intelligence, and she was really dedicated to serving the team, helping do the team a better job. She was a scrum master without knowing that she was that. And what she lacked was the confidence to actually go into a partner's office and tell him that his tasks were way overdue. That takes a lot of guts in every law firm. So that's where she needed the boosting, but her interpersonal intelligence was great. And when I think of these examples, I think it's very interesting to see that most of these examples are the so-called non-lawyers. I really hate that word. But these were people, project assistants, or these were very well-rounded lawyers who really who were so much more than lawyers. So I think we need so much more than the traditional lawyer profile, the I-shaped or even the T-shaped lawyer. We need so much more rounded personalities, and we need the so-called non-lawyers to add all these different intelligences.
Yeah, Marion, I think you did great examples, and about your conclusions, I would say that that's the problem with a lawyer's education, that we basically educate lawyers with linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences. So it's true that maybe we can have different intelligence from other profiles that are no lawyer. But I would say that if we go deep and deep, we can find different intelligence in lawyers too. The point is that they have not been trained, and they can be also shamed, the lawyer. I mean, to think that I'm participating to a legal matter because of my musical intelligence. I mean, this can be a shame for someone. So that's the point, to, I would say, to give back honor to the other kind of intelligence, and to be able to take advantages of them in our project, because they are very strong, as your example showed. And I think that that's a lot of space really where to use it, where to incorporate. So I really hope we can all change our way of educating people, including more and more different intelligences, to get the best from everyone, and also to incorporate a creative point of view in our handling of legal matters.
Absolutely.
Great concept. Thanks a lot for your presentation and your idea. And I think that's sort of giving us a little bit of a, it's bridging us and taking us actually to the next topic in a way. When it comes down to the overall, say, question around what are the professional skills I need to have. Now, obviously, the intelligences are competencies, if you like, but how do I actually translate those into professional skills? And also, I'm not sure whether you're going to touch upon it, also actually embed them in the overall organization structure, or does actually organization play a role in actually shaping those? And I'd like to hand over to our next speakers, Nina and Oliver, who can talk from experience, who have recently built actually an LPM function at NER and actually developing it further. So we're looking forward to your idea. Your floor, please.
Thank you very much. I quickly share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, Nina and we took a closer look at the skills necessary for legal project management. And we started from the observation that the demand is increasing for legal project management, but also for legal project managers within law firms and also in-house legal departments. But when we looked in the job adverts, we found that the description of the skills the companies were seeking for, they were rather vague. And so that's something Nina will also talk to you about in a minute, about the specific skills that we think are necessary. In addition, from our perspective, those skills, they're intimately intertwined with the organization as a whole, both from a structural perspective, but also from a cultural perspective of what mentality is pervasive in the company. But yeah, for now, I hand it over to you, Nina, to start.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we all know there's a broad set of skills that are necessary to manage projects. We focused on a handful of, I would say, traditional skills to start with that are needed now and we think are also needed in the future. We do believe, and that is our experience at NER and in different projects as well, that the professional knowledge is still something that a project manager in legal projects should have. It is much, much easier to have a standing as a legal project manager in a big law firm if you actually know the material, if you know the procedural law, if you understand the dynamics of a law firm. That may not be necessary in every single project, but our observation is that in bigger law firms, and especially at a point where you're starting to implement legal project management, that is still a big thing, because it helps to holistically regard and implement the interests of all stakeholders and clients if you can actually prove that you understand the matter. Another thing that is, especially from my point of view, because I do a lot of process management as well, is actually process management and understanding that, being able to understand what is a standardized task, what is a highly individual task, modeling that process if you can, or get someone to model it. That helps to show everyone where you're at in your process. That helps to divide those tasks in, like I said, standardized tasks that might be automated and actually apply technology to them, and also show where individual knowledge and your value in a law firm, your legal expertise, is in the whole process. Also really important in our view is to know about different legal project management or project management standards and methods. Not all standards and methods, if you look at Agile and Waterfall, for example, are applicable or appropriate in every project. On a German procedural law, for instance, it would be highly unlikely or unusual to have an absolutely agile approach, because you are bound to certain steps in a certain way. So again, that also plays with the professional knowledge, because if you have that knowledge of the procedural steps, you will be able to apply Waterfall where it is necessary and Agile where it's appropriate, and then have a good mixture of methods that actually work for your project and make it more efficient. But the greatest skill that we see, as like I said, in the traditional skill set, is leadership. We believe that the most valuable resource is and will forever be the human resource. So to show them what the overall goal and vision is of the project, to show them the purpose, to show them their why, and to motivate them in the way, and create a sort of commitment and engagement from your team is so valuable. And that is valuable for classical legal project management, but also for change management and everything that builds on needs that are in connection with human resources. And we believe that a legal project manager, and that is more connected to him, should really work on his leadership skills to do exactly that: engage your people, make them committed to the project, show them where they're at, show them what their task is, where their task and is in the entire project, and help them understand why it is important that they do it. And on another level, and we will come to that more later, is enablement of your team. If you enable your team to do their task and to perform the task to the best of their ability, they're going to be more motivated to do it. So help them and provide resources they need. Do they need a technology, workspace, all of that? Or do they need a special training to fulfill it? That, again, is, in our view, a form of leadership.
Yeah, and beyond those classical skills, we dedicated this extra part to digital skills, because we thought in this era of digitalization that they are so important. And from our perspective, we think that it's mainly 3 skills that are necessary. It's first of all like that you need to have the knowledge of the tech tools that are available, and the ability to integrate them into the legal project workflows, which obviously need to exist in the first place, and you need to have the knowledge of those workflows to have that ability. Just for example, if you have like document analysis or document automation, you need to know at what steps and where actually to make use of such tools, and you need to know that they exist and what kind of tools exist. And thirdly, somewhere you need to have the skill to apply those tools eventually. So those 3 skills, we thought about 3 areas where we think this is really important. It's not an exclusive list, but first thing is the data, like having data based decision making. So you need to have data gathering and data analysis. For example, if you have large civil proceedings, that you can balance the workload between the many lawyers that work on the same project. First of all, you need to collect the data, you need to gather the data, and then to come up with a decision. The second area would be like visualizing your work, like that your stakeholders, or also your client as a law firm, can see your progress, and that not in maybe the traditional Excel way, presenting Excel sheets, but maybe you think about new ways. And maybe that also fits nicely with what Anna said about the spatial intelligence that legal project managers might make use of here. And thirdly, the third area that from our perspective would be really important is knowledge management. In particular, when you have a large and long projects that take quite a while, you have people leaving, so you need to somehow institutionalize that knowledge in large projects. So, but having said at the beginning that we looked at those skills, I also already said that from our perspective, it's the organization that plays also a vital role, and because it sets the environment for the skills actually to flourish. So first of all, the structure. And we looked at organizational forms, and we based our analysis on the distinctions made in the project management body of knowledge, where you have those distinctions between different kind of organizational forms you have, and we focused on mainly on matrix organizations. So in those matrix organizations, you have a functional manager and a project manager. Functional manager would be, for example, would be like head of HR, head of finance. And we applied that to law firms or in-house legal departments, and thought like practice groups look very similarly. For example, you could have a project where you have like an M&A transaction. You have somebody from the corporate team, the antitrust team, in those practice groups. And those are the functional managers. On the other hand, you could have legal project managers. And there are different kinds of matrix organizations. For example, there's the weak matrix organizations. And in a weak matrix organizations, the authority and responsibility for the project lies with the functional manager. In a balanced matrix organization would be rather balanced. So for example, there's a legal project manager that is not only there for scheduling meetings, but actually has authority and responsibility to control the budget and also to set the timeline. And in the most extreme case, there's a strong matrix organization where actually the legal project manager has a lot of authority. And we, like this distinctions, we didn't make it mainly to say what's best, but rather like as an organization, you need to find out, or you need to think about in what form you operate to understand what kind of skills you need. Just for example, if you work in a weak matrix organization and the project manager, legal project manager is actually only there to schedule meetings, it's rather frustrating to employ a highly skilled legal project manager with many intelligences, but cannot employ them and apply them, but is rather an assistant. But apart from the structure, like the organizational form, we discussed that you somehow need to acquire the skills and provide the skills as an organization. And I just quickly discuss the two questions you need to ask yourself and then come to training, because I think it fits nicely with what Anna said. So the two questions I think you need to answer as an organization is, do you want to have those skills internally, or you want to outsource those skills? Because there are many more, or we see an increasing market for of firms delivering those skills or providing those skills externally. And the second question is, do you want to hire people, or do you want to train the people you already have? And from our perspective, it's like this, like having a basic training of legal project management within a law firm or in-house legal department is really essentially really something everybody can benefit from, because it increases the awareness of the importance and enhances the communication within the whole project team, and also the ability to use the tools and the methods of legal project management. If everybody has some basic understanding, it's really helpful. But then something that's really important when you have such trainings is actually I think it becomes difficult, because then you need to answer those questions. Who's actually participating in those trainings? Is it only the lawyers, or do you also upskill like as a law firm, the assistant or paralegals? And often it's rather the paralegals who are more confronted with such work than an associate. So that's something we really need to answer and think about. And secondly, that you actually allow the people to spend the time, and not only spending the time, but also investing in those trainings, not just sitting there and writing emails at the same time to have some more billables. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly, that a theoretical training can only be a start. You need to actually live it as a company. So you need to make use of that theoretical knowledge in practice. So it must be lived. And that's something that's, I think, also very closely connected to the culture and the mentality. So that's something Nina speaks to.
Most definitely. I mean, you can have an organizational structure in theory, but to live it is also part of the mentality. And one point that connects really well to what Oliver just said is, what kind of mentality do I have? Do I allow my people to actually train themselves, to attend trainings? And that kind of positive mentality is something that we think is very, very worth setting. Because for the success of projects and also the implementation of sustainable legal project management, it is so important to actually have that mentality that is supportive in that area. We also think that the mentality depends as much as on the organization as on the individuals itself, and connecting again to leadership in, for instance, a legal project manager, we think that's where it can start. Because what is described often as the mirror effect is that if a legal project manager or a leader acts in a certain way, the team will copy their behavior. So if I, as a leader, as a legal project manager, make sure that I live a good mentality and the values together with the organization who has to support it as the entity, really, then I'm much more likely to have a team that also lives that mentality or has that mindset. One of the major things that we see in a mentality is actually communication. And you may think, why is communication a mindset? Isn't that a technical skill? I can just go and learn a certain form of communication and that's it. That is certainly true in the beginning, but in our view, it is much more than that, because also that is connected to what Anna said. I can choose how I phrase my sentences, I can choose my language, I can choose my words, and I can do that in a better way if I have a mindset that supports that and if it's authentic. And my words, they form communication, and hence they form the mindset of the company. And if I have a company where it's allowed to swear to cuss, it's going to be less successful because people don't feel comfortable in that kind of environment. And so communication as a mentality, as something that you practice every day and that you have everyone practice, will set an environment that is actually healthy and positive and will help everyone flourish. There is something called the no brilliant jerk approach that Netflix has introduced. And I really, really like that, because they have a very large mission statement, and communication and positive and respectful communication is one major part of that. And they clearly communicate in their mission statement that they will not allow brilliant jerks to exist in the organization. What do they mean by that? They mean that even if someone, or especially if someone is brilliant professionally, they will still have to communicate according to their values, to Netflix's values. Because they say they will not allow that value or that mentality to be ruined by someone who might be brilliant in one way, but ruins it for everyone else. And they also say that if someone is that brilliant professionally, they should be able to understand how important communication is and apply it. And I think that's a very, very nice standard. It's nicely communicated, it's openly communicated, so everyone knows where they're at. For us, what we discussed also in the chapter is the Harvard negotiation project and getting to yes as a base where you can start to learn your communication skill set. You can, of course, choose whatever works for you, but for us, even though it is a negotiation technique originally, it also works in everyday communication. I've already mentioned that language is key, and I just want to mention that again, and that you have to really practice your communication and your positive mentality to make it work. And it's a lot of effort, we know, but we think it's really, really worth it. And it will help your entity as a whole. Thank you.
Yeah, and so to quickly wrap this up, I think we can say that it's not enough just to employ certain people with certain skills and but you also need to integrate them in your company, and you need to set up the company the right way that the skills can can flourish. Thanks.
Thank you, Oliver and Nina. Very, very insightful, and I believe also supported by a lot of actually practical experience and all the nice actually angles that one can take in order to make this work. I mean, the Achim actually raised an interesting question or item as such, whether it's really the organizational framework, or is it a cultural framework, or is it both? And is the one preceding the other? Which one is actually sort of the leading point of reference that you would regard in that context of structure? What would you how would you respond? What's your view on it?
Regarding the framework, I think it's so it's both, I guess. Oh, that's my not I guess, but I think it's both. It's the organizational form, and I think it's a bit distinct from the mentality part. However, I think maybe Nina, you have a different view on that, but I think somehow also structure can replace mentality, and maybe even more the other way around. So having a bad structure, but having a lot of transparency, a very open organization, somehow you don't need to have the best structure, but it can be replaced with a certain culture and mentality that's pervasive in the company. What do you think, Nina? Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't need to be both. What I was just thinking is probably more that if an organization takes conscious decision to either have an organizational structure or a certain mentality, that may be more the key, because then you actually have leadership that cares about it, and that may be more important than to have one or the other or both, but to have the commitment to do it.
And maybe the sad thing or the good thing is if you have a bad structure, it leads to, I think it also influences the mentality, and also the other way around. If you have great structure, maybe also you also attract people with certain cultures, certain mentality that is more positive.
Thank you. Isabella, I see you're the first one actually making use of this fabulous Zoom functionality of raising your hand.
Yeah,
so the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something about strategic thinking. Sometimes I see in organizations where people act as a little bit like a firefighter, like they don't see ahead, they don't plan ahead, they only see what is in front of them on a daily basis. I have a former boss who once told me, I only see what is in front of me, and that's it. And I thought, well, this is not okay. I would like to have a leader who knows how to plan ahead, who thinks about the future. I know we're living in a very uncertain time now, but it's not an excuse to be strategic and to anticipate what can be in the future in terms of your project, what can change, what's the setup that can change. The company can actually maybe go on a bit of trouble, maybe you would change your team, maybe you will need more diversity in your team, maybe you need people from different intelligences. But I think from a leadership point of view, I will stress a point of having a strategic mind. In hiring people, in training people, and in working in LPM for sure.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that kind of reflects in the skill of process management as well, because if I have the overview, it doesn't have to be in a process model, but if I, as a legal project manager, have the process right in front of me in my mental, in front of my mental eye or wherever, then I will be able to adjust and react much more quickly to any situation, any circumstances that are thrown my way.
Thanks for that. An important topic, obviously, also in terms of, I mean, when we initially started the book and also bringing people together, the idea was really, we all started these projects. LPM has been on the agenda. We all invested money. Now the question is what to do with it. And we all made our first, actually, we experienced at first hand, actually, how it started actually gaining some traction. But this is really showing how we need to reflect on taking it to the next level. And that's an important contribution to that thinking. So although this is not time boxed, we, as good project managers, we all should obviously abide by the time frame set, and therefore I'd love to actually almost immediately, real time, definitely hand over to Jean-Marie. I'm quite glad actually having you, last but not least, as joining us today. I got to know her as being actually the sort of the founder, inventor, chief coordinator of a program called Leadership Development for Young Female Attorneys in South Africa, where she actually helped those inspiring young women actually to move to the next stage of leadership. So we can expect nothing less than actually deep insights into leadership, diversity management, and building actually effective teams. So over to you, Jean-Marie.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I hope I can live up to that. So I didn't prepare a PowerPoint because I thought I would like to just speak to you as we move through this topic, and it's based on what I've written for Ignace's book on legal project management, and obviously for us it's more concerning team diversity, intercultural competence. So that's the composition of your team, how your team is put together, and the importance of your team. And although the technical process is extremely important, your team is just as important, because the team is, they are the ones implementing the process. So although a lot of emphasis is usually placed on the process, not enough emphasis is placed on the team and getting the team right. True in the legal profession, because as you all may know, the legal profession tends to think of itself as a unique model operating in unique environments, and we are very prone to placing each other in boxes: a labor lawyer, a family lawyer, a corporate or commercial attorney. And there are always many excuses for why behavioral tools and effective team management, etc., is not applicable to a law firm or a legal profession, because of how things are structured, how departments are run. For example, you have leading the team with 2 candidate attorneys working with them. It's just not conducive for all of these kind of airy-fairy ideas of how to lead a team, structure a team, bring in legal, etc. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we move through. And I'm also going to be speaking mostly from our practical experiences. So when I refer to an analysis or the process, I'm referring to our problem analysis process, which we use in combination with behavioral tools, working from the ground up to make sure everything works well, everybody is integrated in the team, in the corporation, etc. And in terms of this and building team diversity, intercultural competence, and of course, a good team, there are 3 issues that we usually identify. The first being growth potential, or rather an issue with growth potential of the team leader, or maybe the LPM, or whoever the leader may be in that situation. Then also team diversity, meaning attorneys with different behavioral traits, different skills, different working styles, even different professions coming into play within the legal team to offer different insights. And the last being effective communication. All 3 of these have their own intricate challenges that we need to work through every time. The first and foremost element to discuss is the leadership potential of the leader or the LPM. This is ultimately the person who needs to be good with the process and who needs to have the skills to integrate the team, to understand who brings what to the table, who needs to be placed in which position, who needs a certain type of communication, and who needs to be communicated with in a different type of way. They need to understand the weaknesses and the strengths of the team, and they need to have a clear vision of what it is that each team member contributes. But unfortunately, we mostly and frequently see that in this situation, most firms, legal project managers, corporates take a very top-heavy approach. That means they start from the bottom in the analysis or process phase, going through every single element and stage and step, identifying everything that is wrong, placing blame, and then at the end they get to the leader or the project manager, and then they only consider his or her capabilities. We are of the opinion that you should follow a different approach, starting with the capabilities of the leader and the LPM, because they are the people leading the team. It only makes sense that their capabilities, their communication styles, their behavioral traits, and what they contribute to a team is the most important starting point before you can even think about what's wrong with the structure, what's wrong with the team, why are the wrong people in the wrong place. Because ultimately, it's all going to come back to the leader, who needs to be the one coordinating everything, handing out work, allocating duties. So if he doesn't have a basic understanding of team communication and assembly, there is going to be an issue with team diversity, team cohesion, team communication, and then ultimately an effective process and getting the product delivered. And in this space with growth potential and leaderships, we see three core leaders coming to us for assistance. First are those that genuinely believe in the process and want to see a change. Second are those that genuinely think they believe in the process and want to see a change. And then those that really couldn't care less, they're just doing it to appease a very demotivated, very frustrated team. When we're dealing with leaders that are truly committed to this process and want to see a change, we usually deal with the leaders and the LPMs that are people prone to natural growth potential, and they're exceptionally committed to this process. They accept equal blame, if not more blame, for things that go wrong within the team and responsibility for the success of the team. They lead by example. They're usually the people that come to us and say, okay, we want to go first. We want to be the first to be analyzed. We want our outcome. We want to share it with the team, show them how it's going to work and how we're going to implement this. And in correlation, the team is usually very positive, very open to change, very willing to learn, and they want to make a positive impact on the team. So they're generally open in their way of thinking and learning and seeing a real difference. So you can see here how already the growth potential of the leader and putting the leader's capabilities first is absolutely crucial and essential. If we're looking at the leaders that come to us and they genuinely think they want to change, they are usually initially open to the process and initially open to change. But through the process, they ultimately realize they're not okay with giving up as much control. They're not okay with so much change. So through the process, they become increasingly defensive, and the change communication becomes really difficult. They start from a point of agility, moving to a point of being more rigid and more rigid and more rigid. Their frustration actually becomes palpable because they're realizing everything is not as okay as they thought it was. Team members don't necessarily view them the way that they thought they are viewed. There are some problems that need to be addressed. So they become more frustrated and they kind of want to put the brakes on it. In their team also, the team is usually a little bit more reserved. They're open to change, but they want the leader to lead by example. And they're also usually the team that will come to you and say, look, we've done this before. We've had so many of these analyses done. We have all of the outcomes filed in our cabinet. No real change has come from that. The last, of course, being those that only do it to seek to appease a frustrated or demotivated team. So they don't believe in the process at all. They don't really believe that there is room for change. There is a need for change. There is a need for coaching. There's a need for team diversity and looking at all of these different elements. And the only real motivation they have for doing this is to kind of confirm preset ideas they already have of each team member, to attribute this to them and to then decide, okay, who needs to be replaced and what changes need to be made solely on what they have judged to be or not to be. And this is also usually the most difficult team to work with because they're scared, they're very minimally involved, they're not open to giving suggestions and opinions because it's not welcomed. and they usually act out of fear and distrust. So as you can see here, everything I've just mentioned goes back to the leader, the LPM, whether he structured the team or whether somebody else assembled the team and he now needs to, or she now needs to lead the team. It goes back to the growth potential of the leader. It's key, it's core, it must be considered first. The second is team diversity and bringing that into the team cohesion. Again, this stage also has its own challenges. The core problem with team diversity is a lack of effective communication. Teams or corporates or law firms will always come to us and say, we have team diversity. We're so sure of it because it's included in our core values. Our core values speak to diversity in team members with different race, religion, background, culture. And that's all great and wow, but that's really value diversity. And it's not essential team diversity. Team diversity is about different behavioral skills, different personality traits, different strengths and weaknesses, different ways of approaching problems and dealing with those problems. And the absolute irony of this is, if you approach team diversity by appointing people based on different behavioral skills, traits, strengths, weaknesses, you will naturally appoint people within your value diversity that come from different racial backgrounds, different genders, different cultures. It just naturally flows from there. A few key things to consider here in terms of team diversity and how it interplays with your team cohesion and ultimately leading to executing great processes and projects is, first and foremost, why are you appointing team members? Mostly, appointments are done out of necessity and urgency. So if you tick all the right boxes, great, you're hired, which means you've hired an amazing labor lawyer or amazing labor litigator who's got horrible communication skills, who's prone to provocation, and who demotivates the team. So now you have to make harsh decisions further along the line because you were motivated by urgency and necessity and you didn't apply the right processes in the beginning to put the right person in the right position. It's also a very short-sighted approach because people tend to appoint people who meet the immediate checkboxes. So you will appoint somebody that has the qualifications you require, the experience you require, all of these checkboxes met, but you'll oversee the person that doesn't necessarily meet all of those boxes now, but is more motivated, more ambitious, more willing to learn. And in a couple of months or a year, they will be the perfect team leader. They will be the perfect project manager. They will be perfect in that scenario. But because of the way the appointment was done and the reason, that is overlooked. The second thing that comes into play here is hiring people with similar behavioral traits as the leader. Workplace satisfaction is key. You want to be in a harmonious workplace or in a harmonious environment. So leaders, and if the legal project manager is able to appoint his own team, appoint people or naturally tend to appoint people that are like them, that have the same reasoning patterns, that have the same personalities, because it makes for a very harmonious working environment. But it makes for horrible effectiveness in your process. Because when the pressure hits, you're all bringing the same strengths and challenges to the table. So you may have a team that is exceptionally detail-orientated, very good at identifying errors, and they will be handing in perfect work that has absolutely no errors in it. But they are all probably prone to being a little bit more anxious, not being able to delegate effectively. And because they are so concerned with the perfectionism of this project and getting it perfect, they may also deliver late. So you've got a great team delivering perfect work late, mostly, probably, and your team is anxious and overly stressed, and you have an issue with the team not delegating effectively. What you also need to consider in team diversity is those leaders or the companies that come from the point of view that only certain people with certain qualities and certain strengths can be leaders. We are all leaders. We all lead in different ways, and we all communicate in different ways. Say, for example, you were to appoint somebody that's very challenging, very dynamic, sees the big picture, forces results, but is prone to provocation and prone to provoking others, versus appointing somebody that's very diplomatic, very easygoing, listens to everybody, makes sure everybody is heard, not great with conflict, but is very good with bringing the team together and having kind of social cohesion. Both great leaders, both communicating in very different ways. If you were to have the last example, which we will call a team worker as the leader, with an employee working underneath them that's very dynamic and challenging, she will need, or he will need, to understand how to effectively communicate with this person that's more dynamic. What tasks are you allocating to this person? What roles, what responsibilities? What are you taking away from them? Where are you integrating them in the team? And the same vice versa, if the stronger individual, the more dynamic individual was the leader, and the more diplomatic individual, the employee. Of course, in terms of team diversity, you have to speak about intercultural competence because it comes into play with team diversity. As I said, it naturally flows from appointing people with different behavioral traits, different personalities, different experiences, strengths, and weaknesses. It's very important to consider this so that you don't appoint the wrong people in the wrong positions, and you have to make very harsh decisions later on. It's also very important to think about intercultural competencies in terms of effective communication. In our experience, the biggest challenge we've seen with intercultural issues is bad communication. Bad communication usually stems from a rigid working environment because employees are not encouraged to speak up or to ask questions. Rigid environments are usually bred by leaders that don't have really good growth potential. So you can see how this process just continues to flow back and forth in the same circle. If you have good communication in your team, you build a relationship of trust in your team, a foundation of trust, where it's okay to ask questions, where it's okay to have different experiences and opinions and to express these, where it's actually encouraged to debate different issues and come up with different solutions to different problems. And behavioral tools can help you to understand this and can help you to implement this effectively. If you're interacting and communicating effectively with your team, it's a great starting point to communicate and interact good with people from different cultures. We learn how to interact with people based on different cultures because we come from the point of view that we need to be respectful. We don't need to understand the culture, we just need to be respectful of people with different cultures. So we don't encourage communication about this. We don't encourage open debate and communication with regards to this in the workplace. And again, that's where team diversity is essential, because different people with different traits, different personalities will be prone to ask different questions and handle it in different ways. And this cannot exist if you do not understand or recognize the diverse identities of people in different teams and different cultures. People also become more adept at offering opinions and asking questions, but if they don't communicate correctly, they falter, and it creates stunts in intercultural competencies. Further difficulties that pop up is that we think talking about culture is a very sensitive subject matter. So we don't ask questions because we don't want to risk offending somebody and we don't want to risk making somebody uncomfortable. Therefore, we make assumptions while we keep quiet, and then we actually do offend somebody and we actually do say something disrespectful. But if we have good communication that is not lacking, it's okay for us to ask questions about different cultures, to ask how different cultures see things in different ways, and how we can actually even use that to the strength of our team. And again, just to bring it all together, the effective communication goes back to good team diversity, which goes back to an open office environment, which goes back to a good leader. These are the main points that we usually deal with and that we are concerned with in the process and in our problem analysis. These are the main things that we see and the main issues that we try and solve as we go through this process. I hope it has been informative to you. I would be really glad to take all of your questions about this. I'm sorry I cannot go into a lot more detail with every one of the challenges and giving a lot more of the examples that I can, but I'm mindful of the time and I want to be respectful of that. Thank you so much for granting me this opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you to Ignis as well.
Thank you. How shall I say this? What you summarized is actually something we should remind ourselves every single morning when actually walking into the office, talking to our teams, and sometimes you feel bad actually listening to someone like you actually pointing us this direction, because it may mean that we need to try harder, actually work harder on actually improving this environment and just be better, whatever you want to call it, leaders, inspiring people in terms of our team management. And but that set aside, any comments, immediate responses or questions?
I would have one question. You said we should only, or should rather hire motivated people. So what do you suggest? How do we find out whether somebody is motivated? Because it's so difficult to look inside somebody. That's, yeah, what are your suggestions to overcome that?
Are you still on mute?
I put it off to avoid all the background noises. So yeah, so it's not such an easy question to answer because it goes back to a couple of different things. First and foremost being your company culture and the foundations of your company culture. What is your vision? What's your mission? Where are you going? Where are you? Because if you interview somebody or you have to appoint somebody, you want to make sure that they are also motivated by this vision, by this mission, so that you're sure you appoint people that you don't need to motivate every day, but that's already encouraged to be motivated by this dream or this purpose that you have. The second one is using behavioral tools. We, for example, use the Balbin tool, which can be used in the recruiting process. So it can help you understand exactly what kind of individual you need in that specific team role. Do you need somebody that's more challenging? Do you need somebody that's more detail orientated? And it can help you structure your actual job description that you advertise in the correct way. Once you interview the person, you can use the tool again to see if the person really meets these qualifications. This also leads to a more motivated employee because you're appointing somebody for the skills and the strengths that they bring to a team, and you're not placing them in a position where you're forcing them to play to their weaknesses. And then there's a couple of other things that you can also bring into play, which I'd be happy to expand on an email to you. But as you can see, there are many different things that need to work together in harmony to make sure that people are motivated.
And maybe you should add, Balbin has been a very effective tool when actually using it in the legal environment with attorneys. So I had the pleasure to experience that myself, and it was quickly actually accepted by the participants as being valuable and actually helping them to also reflect on where they are at in terms of their career and also aspirations.
Yes, it creates a very great visual roadmap for you, which also motivates you because you can see how you are progressing, learning, achieving, growing. Yeah.
So talking about respect, so I think we should respect everybody's diaries, and that leaves me actually with the final task of, in particular, extending a big thank you to the presenters for sharing your ideas with us. Also, a big thank you for those actually who attended today. This is about a community, and it's not Ignat's book, by the way. I should actually write this down in big letters, because I'm so grateful that I've been actually that I've been exposed to the privilege of actually getting to know all the authors and reading all the chapters. And I get it for free. Others have to buy the book. So therefore, a big thank you to all of you actually for participating. Before we split, there's two actually things. One, as I said, the session will be properly cut and then actually posted on the website. We will also actually provide a Spanish-speaking session just with Anna, because there were a couple of interested people who said, okay, we'd rather like to hear it actually in native Spanish, and we'll accommodate that. The next time we'll have the pleasure of actually hearing about actually integrating different functions at law firms for the sake of actually providing an overarching service. Mitch and Anshu will do that actually based on their experience at Blanc-Rome. Also something that they've been raising quite consistently with the ABA and ACC and other institutions. We'll hear from Jim Hannigan about cost and task codes. Jim, for those who don't know, is sitting on the Leaders Board, which is actually the standards organization for task codes globally, quite a relevant body in that regard. But he's also the driver behind SALI, another organization actually driving the idea of meta codes, actually how to tag them appropriately to find your knowledge that you've actually sort of that is incorporated in your metas. And then it will be closed off by a very esteemed colleague of mine, adjunct professor from Vanderbilt, Larry Bridge-Smith, who will talk about collaboration platforms. So a bit more sort of leaning towards the West from my own perspective, more yes-driven, but very insightful topics. So I'd like to actually invite you all actually to attend again. Spread the word. This is everybody's platform. Students, experienced ones, everybody is invited to contribute. And as we learned today, we all do have something to give, irrespective of where we come from, what we do, and what we've seen in life. So